Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, I got to start you off with the pattern we've seen so far this summer, because now that we're moving into the second half of July, assessing what we have and have not seen is going to be critical, and this has been the biggest story. Troughs of lower pressure just off the Pacific Northwest. So the jet stream has come in south and then run over a ridge that sat right here for the most part of the summer over the mid-south. In other words, it's come over just like that. So what's important about seeing this pattern is that this ridge, which is here and has lately moved farther to the west, has not yet set up or stayed over parts of the mid-Atlantic or the southeast. It's been to our west. And therefore, we tend to get flow that comes over the top of that ridge, which has increased our precipitation. And seeing this ridge move even farther to the west, which is climatologically consistent with July, but being aided by this La Nina, means that when you look at the winds today, this is on Monday here, that jet stream comes in like this, runs up through Canada, but the large ridge is here. And what's very important about this is that when you look historically at what develops summer and fall drought, it's ridging that sits over anywhere from Nashville all the way to Raleigh. That's our concern area. But the Bermuda High this year has stayed way over here out in the open Atlantic, and that's been critical to the lack of major drought development. There's been pockets that have gotten dry throughout the Carolinas and Virginia, but more often than not, we've seen daily thunderstorm events come through and kind of save the day. So let's keep all that in mind as we kind of go through this forecast. When I look back at some of the bigger picture things, and let's start with that long range, we just need to assess where are we right now with what's going on with La Nina and these ocean temperatures. It's quite important to see that through here, and this is associated with the placement of that subtropical ridge. I've seen some cooler water show up. But what's important is the water that's just to the south of that, and what we call the main development region, or the water in the Caribbean or the Gulf and along the coast. And what we do notice here is that the ocean temperatures are still warmer than normal. Our La Nina continues. It's quite strong. The trade winds throughout here are persistent. That is the sign of a La Nina. The ocean temperatures are the reflection of it. But even though you see some warmer water emerging here, this is not the beginning of an El Nino. We've also seen quite a bit of very warm water move into the northern part of the Pacific Ocean, and this has helped to shove the jet stream farther and farther to the north, but it is resisting ridging over the southeast, and that's what's critical to this upcoming pattern. Now, we would expect that, okay, because if you look historically, June to September, the years I have listed up here are years where there were moderate to strong La Ninas that did last into summer. It tended to place the greatest drought risk and heat risk in the midsection of the country. Now, many of these years, it favored the western Corn Belt, but notice that along the East Coast, we tended to be wetter compared to normal. And I just want to remind you that every La Nina has a different flavor. What you just need to think about is the risk of being drier is generally here, but the chances of having better than normal precipitation are both along the east and the west coasts. So when you think about that, where has that flavor of La Nina delivered the driest air this year? It's primarily been, at least for the last 30 days, tucked away in the mid-south, particularly western parts of Tennessee and Kentucky, getting into Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas, and parts of Kansas. We have pockets of drought throughout the Midwest, but many of those pockets were filled in over the weekend. Now, this map only goes till 7 a.m. yesterday on Sunday, so it doesn't show the rains that were on Sunday. I'll show those to you in just a few seconds. But why I bring this up is, if you take a look over here, throughout the Carolinas, we've actually seen more than normal precipitation for a lot of places, with only very limited pockets that have missed out on the precip. It is also important just to take note of some of the other drier regions, like parts of New England. That drought will be going away soon as well. And just to take note, there are pockets throughout the western Corn Belt that are dry too. But I think this map maybe sums it up best. This was looking over the last 30 days, so from June 17 to July 17, at precipitation ranks. And what I always look out for when you get on the high end on either side of this, the flooding side or the drought side of the last 130 years. And we see that, generally speaking, for our climate reporting districts here, I know they kind of cover large areas, but we have been near normal or wetter than normal. The drought has been in New England, pockets of the Corn Belt, and then, of course, here, stretching from Missouri and Arkansas through Oklahoma and Texas. And that's where the problems are going to continue to be in a major way, given that we just saw the ridge has moved to sit over the southern plains. Now, I'm going to go to the drought monitor page. I clicked on maps, and I'm going to do a comparison slider. That's what we've got here. Now, what you're going to see is the change in drought from May 31st to July the 12th. So what you see down here is May 31st. That was our drought picture. And at that time, it was really along the coast that we saw the driest conditions. Well, here's the latest drought monitor. And as we slide that, let me just do that for you again. Here's now, and then here's May 31st. And here's what the latest drought monitor looks like. You can see that drought has, of course, expanded in Mid-South and parts of the Midwest, but it's changed a bit in its position across the Carolinas. And I think that overall, most parts of the Carolinas have seen beneficial rains as of late. Most parts, that's not to say everywhere. And that what you're seeing here is just the long-term cumulative statistics that are used in the drought monitor calculation. But the question is, do we have to worry about drought forming? And I'll make a point to tell you that if we can keep the subtropical ridge away, then the answer is no, we don't have to worry about it. The newest European model doesn't show a subtropical ridge coming to the southeast. I know this map may not look like it conveys much information, but do you see this contour here labeled 1020 and this one labeled 1016? That tells me that the highest pressure anomalies are staying out, well, in the North Atlantic. So that keeps the flow doing something like this, which is why when you use the forecast model to say, just show me the next 30 days of precipitation, I can take you in a 30-day sliding window all the way out to almost the end of August. And you see that the models do stay just aggressively on the wetter side of things for much of the East Coast, getting into parts of the Appalachian Mountains and then back into the Ohio River Valley, Tennessee Valley, and Southeast. The reason for this is because the net flow of the jet stream is expected to do something like that, okay? And what this does is it puts more ridges in place here. And if you keep a ridge at the upper levels there and another ridge over here, what we end up getting are more stationary bounties, those weak fronts that just move through slowly because the flow comes around like that and like this. And if you don't shut down the Gulf moisture or the Atlantic moisture, we just have better chances of staying above average in precipitation inside of this area. It also keeps the long duration heat away. It all stays nearer the ridge. So that's why when we look out there for most of the rest of July and into August, the models will not pick up on, until there's a pattern change, they will not pick up on any sort of a threat of long-term drought development here heat and drought development across the southeast getting into the Carolinas. It's just not going to be there because of that pattern. So what could change all of that? I'll give you quick things to think about here. Well, if the ridge does start to expand west and sets up, we'll be the first to let you know about that. Secondly, what if the big ridge that's over the Four Corner States starts to break down? That'll occur first over the North Pacific, specifically over Alaska. If that ridge starts to change in position, that could increase our risk of getting hotter and drier with time. And finally, watch the Hudson Bay low. If it gets deeper, we stay wetter. So those are all things I'm going to be watching. Of course, the other wild card is the tropical season, which we're now in. And even though as of today, the National Hurricane Center isn't watching anything for much of this week, we do know that we're in a year where we expect the wind shear values to be low through the heart of the hurricane season. And just remember, this black line represents average wind shear. The blue has been what's been observed, And if we're in a La Nina, we tend to keep that wind shear below average. High wind shear rips apart hurricanes and keeps them from getting stronger. Low wind shear allows them to develop. And again, we're looking at a season here of about 140% of average. That's kind of the mean of the distribution of a hurricane forecast. It looks to be above average this year. And as you know, August is really the start of when the hurricane season gets going. We'll probably see that this year. And I think the reason for that is right now the MJO is over Australia, but the forecasts have it jumping way out over here by Africa. And I'm going to tell you why we care about that. When we start to see really good rising motion in the atmosphere across the Sahel, that's the area right in through here, it just tends to kick off more active clusters of storms that ride on what are called easterly waves in the wind field across the Atlantic. And those often seed the development of tropical systems. What I've been drawing over here shows you the end of July. And what we're looking at is a forecast of better rising motion when the MJO comes back over toward Africa. That's phase 1 and 2, and gives us more chances of seeing some of those storms. Right now, though, there's a lot of dust coming off of the west coast of Africa. And as I just play this forward, you see those dust plumes just racing across the open Atlantic. And if that dust is there, any would-be system over the next 5 to 10 days will likely have a difficult time developing because of how dry and dusty the air is. So that's kind of what's keeping our hurricane season at bay right now. It's been the MJO position and the dust that's come off of Africa. But at any given moment, we just need to watch the Caribbean and the Gulf and right along our coast for any homebrew systems. I don't see any at this point. One new piece of long-range information before I give you some more details on the short range has been the new update. Let's blow this up so you can see it. There we go. From the IRI multi-model group out of Columbia University. This is their international view, our global view of the precipitation anomalies for August, September, and October. I want to point out a couple of international things at first. Notice throughout much of China, we do grow a lot of crops in the Carolinas that are grown in China. Not seeing major deviations from normal. Same thing for India, especially around India's main cotton producing area, right in through here, wetter conditions. Now it's winter in Australia, but they're expected to have better chances of staying quite wet. But this is what I want you to keep your eye on. Notice in August, September, and October, above average precipitation in the Sahel. And while when we zoom in here on the United States, let's go to North America, you can see that the signals are not strong in the model. It's probably getting washed out in the ensemble average. The likelihood of seeing an above average hurricane season still remains. The model is forecasting above normal temperatures through the remainder of summer and the start of fall for us as well. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. All right. Now from here, over the weekend, we saw some very interesting storm systems that went rolling through. Big ones that produce a lot of hail in parts of Saskatchewan and hail in parts of Nebraska. Now, there were some storms that came through that produced some very small hail in North Carolina, Virginia. And if you ever need a hail report, a field level hail report, just email me and I'll get that to you. But I want to show you what happened up here in Saskatchewan, because this video here shows this field of beans, not soybeans, but edible beans here that just ripped apart by some of the hail. This video comes from Benjamin. Great, thanks. I really appreciate him putting that out there. Again, that's in Saskatchewan. And the Twitter handle here is Mitch and Stuffs. Guy's a storm chaser, and he just caught a view of what some of those storms look like as they were ripping through parts of Saskatchewan. So I just wanted to show you something outside of the U.S. real quick here. But this is our map that we really have to spend just a moment talking about. Heavy rains made it through pockets of the eastern Corn Belt that desperately needed precipitation. But it was hotter and drier in the parts of the southeast and definitely in the interior and southern plains here as well. We saw scattered storms over the weekend. Some of them produced some pretty strong winds and, like I said, some local hail. But what do we expect to see over the coming week in terms of precipitation? Well, if you keep that ridge in the west, that's where all the heat will be. These are all excessive heat watches and warnings and heat advisories. If that ridge is here, that will help us steer clear of going completely dry at this point in the month of July. So as we look out there over the next week, see the placement of the ridge through the next 3 days, and then day 4 through 7, that's where the heat stays on. We do not see the risk of severe weather across our area throughout at least the next 3 days. It's primarily going to stay confined to the northern parts of the United States, and then by Wednesday get into the Ohio River Valley. But we have daily chances. There's 30 to 50% chance of storms every day because of weak frontal boundaries and ample moisture in the area. I do want to tell you toward the end of the week, we do need to be watching for those ridge riding complexes of storms that could come over. They're very poorly forecast by the models, but they could last and build into the unstable area that does typically sit over the southeast. So I'll keep an eye out on those as well. But this is what it looks like put together by the Weather Prediction Center, the WPC. It's part of the National Weather Service. They generally have much of North and South Carolina seeing about a half of an inch to 3/4 of an inch of total precipitation. Some locally heavier amounts, of course, are possible. That's just true of any thunderstorm cluster. Another way to look at this, though, is what are our chances over the next 10 days of getting more than an inch of rain? And generally speaking, because of how weak those frontal boundaries are, the models are unable to really produce lots of precipitation because of that. Even some of these storms might produce it, they won't see it. So we got a 50 to 80% chance in here of getting at least another inch of rain. But notice where it's staying dry. In fact, let me flip this over to show you the probability of getting less than half of an inch. This is the area that we're going to be watching carefully for rapid expansion of drought. So it's the southeast versus the southern plains right now in terms of this pattern. If we look at the high resolution European model, and I was just looking at it right before I started recording. Let's blow that up. There you go. What you're going to see here is these weak frontal boundaries that just keep pushing right up against the Appalachian Mountains. They get over the mountains, and we just get these daily chances of storms. We're now through Tuesday evening. See our chance in through here? Going out into Wednesday morning, afternoon, and evening, another chance at some widely scattered afternoon storms. Then as we get into Thursday, this is Thursday evening, again, same scenario. You're going to see in your local forecast chances of storms every day, but they're definitely going to be hit or miss. As we work toward the weekend, it seems to be drier, but it's also going to get hotter. Low temperature is going to get up there in the low to mid 90s with this. But next week, see the complexes rolling through the Great Lakes? These are the low pressure centers that drag their fronts over us. So maybe by next Monday or Tuesday, we get another chance at seeing more of that rainfall. It's just going to be a matter of watching the radar each day, knowing you have the risk of getting those pop-up afternoon thunderstorms, which I know you're all very used to seeing. So I was just looking here at total accumulated precipitation from the model. And if we just go out here through the weekend, you see a lot of scattered storms producing, 0.2 to 0.5 inches of rain, maybe locally heavier amounts. It's not until next Monday that front slides through. Monday, Tuesday, see it there? That increases the chances of getting some heavier rain. But that's out a week, so the timing of that front still is yet to be decided. So we just need to keep an eye on that. So let's just put it together in terms of anomalies. You notice here over the next 7 days, we do see more places with a little bit of a drier bias, if you notice in through here, than wetter. But into week 2, that's the 15th through the 31st. Oh, I'm sorry. That should be the 25th through the 31st. Because of the jet stream pattern doing this. Okay, take a look. Coming in and over and then diving. The models are going to continue to increase the lift in this area, which improves the precipitation chances. But again, this comes down to what you don't see. The ridge is here. The ridge is there. It is not sitting over the southeast, and that's why we tend to see the wetter forecasts. It's the placement of those ridges that changes the temperature pattern too. Take a look at this. Monday's highs, hundreds stretching up through the whole of the plains. We're going to be seeing upper 80s, lower 90s. Going into Tuesday, heat is still there. Wednesday. When does it start to warm up for us? Toward the end of the week. There's Thursday's highs, mid 90s, low to mid 90s in Raleigh. Friday, but watch the weekend. Saturday into Sunday, we start to see those mid to upper 90s showing up here again. And that's when we go over a little bit drier. How long do we keep that warmer bias around? I love these maps. They're a 5-day sliding window of temperatures. And you can see as we really get into the weekend, that's when our warmer conditions show up here. As we play out into early next week and then stop it here on the 5-day time period going from the 23rd to the 28th, we do carry a warm bias, but the extreme heat is going to be back in the southern plains. And it just stays there. As I take you all the way out to the end of the month of July and the start of August, the models do not want to keep sustained well above average heat for us. They keep it tucked away in the plains and even build it at times into the west. And just to finish up here, we're not the only place, the central United States experiencing a heat wave. This could make some headlines later this week because much of Europe is in the throes of a pretty powerful heat wave as well. It developed last week and is spread from the Iberian Peninsula into Central Europe this week, where temperatures could be 15 to 25 degrees above normal. And at the same time that's going on, we do expect dry conditions with only isolated storms popping up on this heat, primarily confined to the mountains. So flash drought development happening across much of Europe this week as well. All right, I'll keep you posted on any changes and if anything starts to pop up in the tropics, because it's that time of year to be watching it carefully. If you want to, just get signed up right here for my daily reports if you need to stay on top of this throughout the week, and I'll keep you informed there. I appreciate it. Have a good week, and we'll talk to you next Monday. Thanks.